Welcome to the first Audiocrime podcast. We're diving into some seriously dark territory today.
Oh, yeah.
A mystery that's, well, bone-chilling, to say the least.
I'm intrigued already.
It's a horrific unsolved crime. One that has haunted Bavaria, Germany, for over a century. The Hinterkaifeck murders.
Hinterkaifeck, yeah. The name itself sends shivers down your spine when you know the story.
It's tucked away,
Yeah.
isolated, behind the village of Kaifeck.
Hinter meaning literally behind.
Exactly,
Yeah.
behind. Like something lurking in the shadows. It really sets the scene for this isolated place where darkness could easily take hold.
And it did.
On the night of March 31st, 1922,
6 lives brutally taken.
on this remote farm. And you know, you've always been fascinated by these complex and unsettling events. So we're gonna break down what we know, the details, the strange happenings before the murders, the investigation,
All drawn from the historical information available.
like the Wikipedia entry on the case, for example. It's a wealth of information. But our goal is to go beyond just the facts. It's to grasp the mystery, the enigma of Hinterkaifeck, but without, getting bogged down in too much detail.
Right, make it digestible.
Yeah, exactly. What makes this case so disturbing, so unsettling, isn't just the brutality of the crime itself, it's the strangeness of everything surrounding it. It defies simple explanation.
Absolutely. Leaves you with a feeling of unease, a sense of dread that lingers.
So close your eyes for a second and picture this. A small, isolated farm.
Correct.
So isolated that it doesn't even have its own village name. Just Hinterkaifeck, the farm behind Kaifeck, surrounded by thick, dark woods.
You can almost feel the silence, the isolation.
The kind of place where secrets could be buried. And it's here that the Gruber family lived.
Lived and died, tragically.
Andreas Gruber, the patriarch, 63 years old. His wife, Cecilia, 72. Their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, also lived there with her 2 young children.
7-year-old Cecilia and little Joseph, just 2 years old.
And as if this family tragedy wasn't enough, there was Maria Baumgartner.
The new maid.
She arrived at Hinterkaifeck just hours before the murders. 6 lives, snuffed out in a single night.
It's heartbreaking.
What adds to the chill factor here is that in the days leading up to the murders, Andreas Gruber reported some really strange and unsettling things to his neighbors, like bizarre occurrences.
Things that just didn't add up. Things that would make anyone uneasy.
Footprints in the snow, for example.
Leading directly to the house from the woods. But no tracks going back. Someone was coming but not leaving.
Think about that for a moment. Someone approaches this isolated house in the dead of winter, leaving footprints, and then vanishes. It's like something out of a horror movie.
It suggests intention, planning, someone watching, someone with a purpose.
Exactly. And then there were footsteps in the attic.
Can you imagine hearing those sounds above you, knowing you're alone in the house?
This feeling of an unseen presence, of being watched within your own home.
An invasion of privacy, of safety.
There was also a strange newspaper found on the porch, an unfamiliar one.
Who left it there? Why?
Well-
Was it a message? A warning?
Then the house keys vanished.
House keys.
Gone. Before the murders.
Was it someone who knew the house, trying to get in undetected?
It's a chilling detail.
Huh.
But what strikes me as even more unsettling is that none of these strange incidents were reported to the police.
It makes you wonder, were they afraid? Did they have their suspicions?
And to add another layer of creepiness to this whole story, the previous housekeeper had left the farm 6 months before the murders
Left. Why?
because she claimed the house was haunted. Strange voices, unexplained noises.
So the farm already had a reputation for being, well, creepy.
Yeah. So imagine living there with this history of unease and then experiencing those unsettling events. A sense of dread must have been building.
Absolutely. The feeling that something was terribly wrong.
And then came that fateful night, March 31st, 1922. Darkness descends on Hinterkaifeck, and the unimaginable happens.
A night of pure horror.
What we believe happened is that Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia were lured to the barn one by one.
Lured. But why?
We can only speculate. Maybe under false pretenses. Perhaps they were led to believe someone needed help, and then in the darkness of that barn, they were attacked, brutally murdered.
Someone was waiting for them. In the cold. In the silence.
The killer, or killers, then moved into the house. Little Joseph, just 2 years old, was murdered in his crib. Maria Baumgartner, the new maid, in her bed.
So vulnerable. Asleep. Unaware of the horror unfolding.
The weapon used was a pickaxe, or a mattock. a common farming tool.
Turned into a weapon of brutal violence?
Days passed, and the silence at Hinterkaifeck stretched on. It was Tuesday, April 4th, when the alarm was finally raised. Neighbors noticed the family's absence. The mail was piling up.
No one had seen or heard from them in days.
The postman knocked. No answer. A mechanic, Albert Hoffner, worked on the farm machinery for hours. No one came out to greet him.
Life, at least on the surface, seemed to have simply stopped.
Young Cecilia hadn't been to school. The family hadn't been to church. Driven by concern, the neighbors decided to investigate.
And what they found was a scene of unimaginable horror.
They found the barn locked, and inside, piled on top of each other, covered with straw, and an old door, were the bodies of Andreas, Cecilia, Victoria, and young Cecilia.
My God.
Inside the house, little Joseph and Maria Baumgartner lay dead in their beds.
A massacre. An entire family wiped out.
The Munich police were called, led by Inspector Georg Reingruber, but the initial response was, well, chaotic.
The crime scene was compromised almost immediately.
Onlookers, neighbors, all crowding around trying to get a glimpse of the horror.
Yeah.
They even, believe it or not, ate snacks in the kitchen where 2 of the victims were likely killed.
The investigation was hampered from the start. Crucial evidence could have been lost or contaminated.
Autopsies were performed the very next day by Dr. Johann Baptist Domure.
And the cause of death?
Cranial trauma, caused by a pickaxe or mattock. Estimated time of death between March 31st and the early hours of April 1st. But then, the investigation took a strange turn.
Strange. How so?
The bodies were decapitated, and the heads were sent to Munich to be examined by clairvoyants.
Clairvoyance? You're kidding.
I wish I was. It speaks to the desperation of the investigators. They had no leads, no clear motive, so they turned to the supernatural.
And did the clairvoyants offer any insights?
None whatsoever.
Of course not.
The autopsies also revealed some disturbing details. Victoria, for instance, showed signs of strangulation.
So it wasn't just the pickaxe.
And then there's young Cecilia. The autopsy suggested that she might have lived for several hours after being attacked.
Hours.
They found tufts of her own hair clutched in her tiny hands.
Oh, that's just heartbreaking. A little girl suffering for hours after being brutally attacked. It's unimaginable.
Even the clothes the victims were wearing offered some clues. Most were in their night clothes.
Attacked while they slept.
But Victoria and her daughter were in their street clothes.
So maybe they were caught off guard. While doing chores, perhaps?
But beyond the horror of the murders themselves, the police found some truly strange things at the farm. All 6 bodies had been covered. The bodies in the barn were covered with hay. The maid was covered with sheets. Little Joseph was covered with one of Victoria's skirts.
Why would they do that?
It's one of the most puzzling details of the case. Was it remorse, respect, or just a way to hide what they had done?
Who knows what was going through the killer's mind?
And here's another strange thing. Smoke was seen coming from the chimney throughout the weekend after the estimated time of death.
Wait, so someone was still at the farm?
Exactly. The murders likely happened on Friday night, but someone was tending the fire, keeping the house warm, all through Saturday and Sunday.
It's like they made themselves at home after committing these horrific acts.
And there's more. Evidence of recent meals being prepared and eaten. A bed that appeared to have been slept in.
It's chilling. Someone was living there amongst the bodies.
The farm animals were all well fed. The cows had even been milked. Someone was taking care of the farm, going about their daily business as if nothing had happened.
It's such a bizarre contrast, the brutality of the murders and then the mundane act of caring for the animals.
And then there's the dog, the family dog, found alive, tied up in the barn.
The killer spared the dog.
We can only assume it was the killer who tied it up. Why? We'll never know. Was it a moment of mercy? Or a way to keep the dog quiet and prevent it from alerting anyone? It's just another unsettling piece of this puzzle.
Every detail adds to the mystery, to the feeling that we'll never truly understand what happened at Hinterkaifeck.
Robbery was quickly ruled out as a motive. The family's money and jewelry were untouched. So the investigation turned towards other possibilities, and a whole host of suspects emerged. But none could ever be definitively linked to the crime.
It's a case full of dead ends and speculation.
One of the first suspects was Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Victoria's suitor.
Ah, possible love triangle.
Well, Schlittenbauer was among the first to arrive at the farm after the family went missing, and the dog, apparently, reacted very badly to him.
As if it recognized him as a threat.
There was also a witness who claimed that Schlittenbauer showed no shock at the sight of the bodies, and that he seemed very familiar with the farm layout.
Suspicious for sure. But was it enough to make him the killer?
No concrete evidence ever linked him to the crime. Then there's Carl Gabriel, Victoria's husband,
But you said he was deceased?
just presumed dead
Yeah.
during World War I.
Uh,
But his body was never found. So the theory was that he might have returned secretly and found Victoria with another man. Jealousy. Rage.
a crime of passion.
It's a possibility. Years later, there were even claims that a Russian soldier, who some thought might be Gabriel, had confessed to the murders. But these claims were never substantiated.
So another dead end.
Another suspect was Joseph Bertel, known as the Mad Baker.
A mad baker. Sounds like a character from a fairy tale.
He had a history of mental instability. He had escaped from a mental hospital the year before the murders, and there were rumors that he had been involved in a previous murder.
So a known violent individual.
There were sightings of him near Hinterkaifeck around the time of the murders, but the police never found him.
Another mystery within a mystery.
And then, of course, there were the political theories. The early 1920s in Germany were a time of great political turmoil.
Right-wing and left-wing extremists. A lot of violence.
Exactly. And so the isolated location of Hinterkaifeck led some to speculate that it might have been used as a hideout or an arms depot.
Maybe the family stumbled onto something they shouldn't have, or became targets of a political vendetta.
But there was no evidence to support this theory.
So many possibilities. So few answers.
Over 100 suspects were questioned, but no one was ever charged. Albert Hoffner, the mechanic who'd been at the farm just days before the bodies were found, he wasn't even questioned until 1933.
11 years later.
11 years. There was a final interrogation in 1986, based on supposed new leads. Nothing came of it. Even a claim in 1999 that someone had confessed to their employer back in 1935 went nowhere. All the suspects were dead by then.
It's a case that seems destined to remain unsolved.
In 2007, Police Academy students took another look at the case, using modern forensic techniques. Their conclusion: the crime is likely unsolvable. Too much time has passed. Evidence is lost. Witnesses are dead. But they did identify a primary suspect.
It did?
They didn't name the person publicly, out of respect for living relatives.
Wow. So there might be an answer out there, but we may never know for sure.
The victims of Hinterkaifeck were buried in Weidhofen. There's a memorial in the cemetery there. But the skulls of the victims were lost during World War II. They had been sent to Munich, remember, for the clairvoyance.
What a tragic end. Even in death, they couldn't find peace.
The farmhouse itself was demolished in 1923, perhaps in an attempt to erase the horror. But a small shrine now stands near the location, a reminder of the tragedy.
It's a place that will forever be associated with darkness.
The Hinterkaifeck murders have inspired countless books, films, even a podcast episode.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and horrify.
So what are the key takeaways here? A brutal, unsolved mass murder. A family wiped out. A series of bizarre events leading up to the crime. A crime scene full of strange details. A lack of a clear motive. And decades of fruitless investigation.
It's a case that challenges our understanding of human nature. How could someone commit such a horrific act and then just disappear?
The Hinterkaifeck murders remain a chilling reminder that sickness can lurk anywhere, even in the most isolated corners of the world. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unsettling mysteries are those that remain unsolved.
Think about the terror those victims must have felt in their final moment, the helplessness, and the fact that the killer or killers were never brought to justice. It's a thought that can haunt you.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the chilling case of the Hinterkaifeck murders. If you enjoyed this exploration into the shadows, please subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below.